The Broad Perspective Network is not responsible for the content of the following program.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
Oh, we're having an interesting morning already this morning. We have so much to talk about today. One of the things we wanted to kick it off with, because it's in the news off and on, but this is a deeper issue than just what it is at the very initial discussion of it. It's about all the animals that are being disguised as service animals on airplanes. Recently, a peacock was trying to be seated in an airplane because it was a service animal, a comfort animal, or what do you call them?
Emotional support
animal. There you go. And you know what? I don't begrudge anybody an emotional support animal. I get it. But an airplane then don't fly. I mean, if you can't function without this animal, maybe, because they are taking literally everything. They are taking gophers and rabbits and pigs and hamsters and like I said, somebody took a pony. Yeah, they're just really crossing the line. But the bigger issue here is, where does that person's right to be comforted supersede my right to not have to be sitting next to an animal that's going to poop in the seat, or that might bite me, or if I'm allergic to some of these animals, because people do have a lot of animal allergies. Where does their right supersede my right or the other people's rights on the plane?
I think emotional support animals, like service animals, there are some breeds that are probably going to be better than others. And for emotional support, it really does come down to personality of the animals. So I think there needs to be, unfortunately, because so many people are abusing it, I do think there needs to be some sort of a licensing type thing. And clearly, some animals are just not suited to being emotionally supportive. I think it's just a connection that some people may be using as an excuse.
Yes, but you can get them licensed pretty simply. You can get anything licensed very simply.
Yes, you're right. There is something in place for it, but it's really easy to abuse that because it's not a very official type of licensing for emotional support animals.
Yes, that's true. Now, Kevin, you were saying you've had service animals that are trained.
Yes, I've had two pit bulls, as a matter of fact, 2 American pit bull terriers that I had that were emotional support animals. And a lot of people that have emotional support animals, I think that they're going above and beyond the means of what it means to have an emotional support animal. I think that they're taking their pets rather than something that is there to comfort you in an anxiety state or a mental state. I was training my service animals, which you have the option to do, and it is a very tedious and time-consuming thing. I would have to go into places like libraries and make sure they wouldn't bark, make sure they wouldn't use the restroom, places like Walmart that are very busy, and to make sure that they are working, because that's what a service animal is. It's a working-class dog or a working-class animal, and I think that the limitations need to be set to just that, working-class animals. When you look at the American Disabilities Act, the only service animal that they allow is a dog. And that's because a dog has the ability to work and understand commands and thus make decisions based off its training. A lot of people love cats. You cannot train a cat to sit. I'm sure people have tried, but the cat's not going to sit. The cat is not going to alert you to anybody else's presence, and a cat has a flight mechanism to where when it is scared, it will run. And some of the service animals that are given to those that have the American disabilities with a severe cases of anxiety, the animal is actually taught to defend the person in the severe case of anxiety, and it just might be a simple growl or a small bark. Not something that would necessarily terrify somebody, but it would allow somebody to know that, hey, look, this dog is working, this person is scared of you, for whatever the reason may be. It may be a mental illness, it may be coming back from war and they're just a little jumpy, they may need this temporarily, or a child who's been through a traumatic experience needs something to comfort it. You also have people that have seizures where the dog is actually trained to protect the person while having a seizure, because as we know, our society is not necessarily a great place to be sick or ill. And they actually did one report in New York, I believe, where people were actually stepping over a person that was faking illness, stepping and walking right over them as though they didn't exist. So with my particular service animals, one thing I focused on was, again, training, temperament. And it comes down to the individual knowing the personality of the dog. Every dog is not a service dog because every dog does not have the temperament. And when you go into breeding, this does become something that is prevalent in breeders, and they do know the dogs when they are experienced and responsible breeders. You have some dogs that will come out with a personality where they're more of guard dogs than they are of watch dogs, and there is a difference in that. You have some that will come out as attack dogs versus guard dogs or watch dogs, and there's a difference in that, where you have dogs that have an extremely very good temperament where they're just loving, and they would never make a good watchdog or guard dog or attack dog because their temperament is just so loving that they'll lick people. That's just what they do. And oftentimes those are the ones chosen for emotional support dogs.
Okay.
And I think that we need to limit the ability to get an emotional support animal.
Okay. So for you, the discretionary word is animal.
Exactly. And because the discretionary word is animal, my little sister is 14 years old now, and I remember going to her junior high school when she was 13 in 8th grade, and one of the children had a pig, a miniature pig, a parrot, a ferret, and I believe it was like a cat or something. Just animals that were awkward, that didn't belong in a learning environment. And that was their excuse. Oh, we have an emotional support animals. And it really comes down to how many animals do you need?
Right.
When people have service dogs, they don't have 5 service dogs to walk them down the street. You know, a CNI dog is a CNI dog. He doesn't have 6 different animals trained to it. When the military uses dogs to sniff bombs, they don't use different handlers for those specific tasks. They use one handler.
That's interesting, because when you mentioned parrot, I just returned from Arizona a few days ago, and I stopped at a gas station and went into the gas station to get something to drink, and there was a lady in there with a big green parrot on her shoulder. And I thought it was kind of cool. You know, the parrot's talking away, and she was having a good time with it, and the parrot was having a good time, and I had no problem with it. However, would she be on an airplane with that bird? By the end of the flight, I'd probably be ready to make fried chicken out of it, because if it was talking like that for an entire flight, it would be extremely annoying. But at that moment, it was cute.
It's getting ridiculous, because that's the thing. Everybody is so focused on themselves of what they think is an emotional support animal, and a lot of these people don't need emotional support. They don't have any form of anxiety. They don't have any form of mental illness or
everybody
other
has anxiety. Yeah.
You know, something that just occurred to me as a possibility for people that need emotional support animals, especially if they have more than one, like you mentioned. I never heard of that, but we seem to have lost the ability to self-soothe, which is something you have to teach babies how to do to sleep through the night.
Right.
We don't know how to self-soothe, and we're looking for outside sources to comfort us instead of learning how to comfort ourselves.
Exactly all that. I'm gonna read a couple sentences here from an editorial comment in, once again, the Week magazine, and it says, let's see, support animal is one more piece of proof that we live in a culture that fetishizes.
I had a problem with that word
Fetishizes.
Fetishizes.
Yeah, that's a hard word. Thank you. Individual preference and expression over communal well-being. It goes on to say, the credo of this culture is simple and shameless. I am the center of the universe. What I want is what I need, and who cares how what I need affects you? This is where I have the problem. Again,
I think there are people that genuinely need emotional support animals, but for the person that just doesn't know how to self-soothe, isn't it easier to teach them how to self-soothe?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that we've been focused on telling people that you should not care what other people think. I think that we beat that into our children's heads and society's heads for a long time. You shouldn't care what other people think, when in fact you should care. To an extent, you should care. You should care about the person next to you. And our society is losing that because of, I would say, a detached reality with TV and internet and other things like that. It's coming to the point where, like you said, I'm the center of attention, I'm the center of the universe, and what I need is just that. It's that simple, and nobody else should matter. And in reality, my baby, my infant would bother me crying on a flight because I would feel bad for the people around that would just be losing sleep, because you never know what somebody else is going through. I mean, some of these people are on flights because of family members they're going to see. Some of these people are on flights because of families they haven't seen, or business, or whatever the case may be. And we're losing touch with reality that other people have problems.
Right. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
Well, I think as a society, we've gotten far away from the belief that no man is an island. We think that we can all have whatever we want all the time, whatever it is we want, regardless of how anybody else feels like it. And I think, like everything, there's going to be exceptions to every rule, but I'm going to tell you a quick story. My first airplane ride was with my son when he was a toddler. It was a very short flight, only like a half an hour. But this was back in the day when we had the little flip-top ashtrays in the armrests
Yes.
of the seats. So that tells you how long ago it was. And my son was fussing, and he discovered the ashtray. So he's flipping the lid up and down, which makes a banging noise. And I tried to stop him, but he'd start fussing. And I noticed a couple people looking, and I said, it's a short trip. You can either have them fuss, or you can put up with the clanging of the ashtray lid going up and down. He flipped with that ashtray lid up and down, up and down, up and down through the flight, which was better than fussing, I guess. Those were their choices. I explained it. They were okay.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's had small children and flown knows the stress. And it is stressful. And then the biggest concern when your child is crying is everybody around you. You just want them to be quiet, because you know that everybody is, like Kevin said, they're trying to rest. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know why they're going where they're going. And to have a crying child, you don't want that. As a parent, you don't want that. But sometimes you do everything in your power, and it's hard. You just hope people will understand. But I think a lot of it is a consideration that you really are caring, that you don't want to disturb other people. And you can tell the parents that really don't care, that they don't care. They don't care what their kid's doing or whether it's disruptive or anything. They just don't care. And then there are those who really do, and sometimes it's
and I think that's where it
tough.
comes back to, when we go back to the animal, it's getting ridiculous. Again, you should not have to sit next to a peacock, period. A peacock cannot be trained. It's going to screech when it wants. It's going to do what it wants. It's going to be like the child that just never listens, because it's not an animal that can be trained. It's not a work animal. It's just an animal. It's just that. It's going to do it in its innate nature and instinct. And that's where it's starting to get ridiculous. They need to limit the ability to bring animals on planes. I have 2 service animals. I'm not, no way, shape, form, or fashion, going to take my service animals on the plane. I'm one that lives with this service animal. I'm one that constantly walks around with a service animal when I did have them. And when you have a service animal, you should train them, period, point blank. And mine are kennel trained, so that when if I would have to take a flight, they would be crated. They would be put on the bottom of the plane where they should be. And then when I get off the plane, they would be given back to me immediately. And I think that that's the way it should be done, because that would be the same with, say, a CNI dog or other instances where people can have help.
right.
If I felt that I was going through so much anxiety, I should alert the airport that, hey, look, I have an anxiety problem, or whatever the case may be, and that would allow them to make the necessary changes to get me on the plane, maybe first or last, to where they could work with me as a human being to maybe accommodate me in some form or fashion, so that we don't have animals on the plane.
Maybe there should be, they all have headsets now with soothing sounds and with movies and whatever. Maybe there should be some sort of soothing program for people with anxiety for calming them down, and deep breathing. It might be this will help your anxiety. Inhale, hold.
It goes along with exits
exhale.
to the left, exit to the right,
Yes,
and behind me.
there you go.
It's just to the point where, like I said, they need to limit it. It's just that simple. I mean, ADA saw through it, and people tried it with the cats and the pigs, and they tried it because they even tried to go to the length of saying a pig could be trained and it was smarter than a dog and everything, and dolphins and all this other stuff. And the ADA pretty much said, point blank period, if it's not a dog, we're not qualifying it. It's not working. We're not putting it up. It's not going to be your CNI dog or your protection dog or any of that. And I think that that's what emotional support needs to turn into. Again, the breed is not specific, so you can have any breed, but I think it still needs to be specified that if the breed is not a working class dog, It does not need to be an emotional support dog.
Right. No, there's nothing I would love better than to have my dog with me on an airplane. I love my animal. I love him dearly. However, he's not trained. And he would be trying to lick everybody and, jump on them or kiss them or what have you. And I know better. That will never happen. Because why? Because I'm considerate of other people. It's not just about me. For me, I'd love to have him. I'd love to have him close by. But it's not just about me. It's about other people. And I think that's what we're losing sight of. With that, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with some more interesting subjects here on The Broad Perspective. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, I am His Majesty the Soul, King of Mauritius, and I invite you to help me build the world's planetary egg, an ecological geophysical galleon. It's approximately 180 acres, and it is home to 3,000 researchers from around the world. It is the world's first sovereign, planetary, independent jurisdiction that has the capability of advancing and progressing and fast-tracking every aspect of innovation, helping us redefine what it means to be human in a new world. So check out our website. It's www.mauricii.com. MORACEAE.com. I look forward to seeing you, and please contribute, donate to the GoFundMe page. I look forward to meeting you, and let's build the planetary egg. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And we were just talking about service animals on planes. Now we're going to jump to a completely different subject, and we're going to talk about gun control, if you will, or gun whatever, in light of what's just happened again in Florida. This is the 18th school shooting so far this year. Some kids, you know what? I'm really proud of these kids at this school in Florida. I mean, they are I'm not saying other kids at other schools didn't take action, but these guys are taking action. They are having rallies. They are speaking. There was a young man that spoke last night. I think his name was Ryan Hogg, H-O-G-G was his last name. And he gave a wonderful, poignant speech. And he's not saying take away the guns. That's not what he's saying at all. But he said it's time to take action. Something has got to change. Now, what that is, I'm not sure, but I think probably all of us here have some insights into that. But once again, he's blaming the politicians that they're not doing anything, that they're inactive, and any special interests. He was talking about it's time to get rid of special interests and lobbies and all this kind of stuff and pay attention to what's really happening. And it probably isn't going to change until some of these people's own children are the ones that are involved in this. Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, gosh. I read an article on the internet recently, and I was so moved by it. I printed it, and I did not bring it. And I'm so sorry now because I don't know the title. I don't remember the author's name, but it was a reprint of an article from Reader's Digest, I think a year ago.
Okay, go for it.
It talks about a teacher that has been doing something different ever since the original, the Columbine thing. She's been doing something different in her classroom, and when the parents of one of her students found out, she was just mind blown by it. Every Friday she has the kids take out a piece of paper, write down who they'd like to sit next to next week. Now, none of this is guaranteed. They know that, but who would they like to sit next to? Who was the most improved citizen of the week in their classroom? And I think there were a couple other questions. I don't remember the details, but what that teacher does with those papers is she spreads them out in front of her and she looks for patterns. She wants to know who are the kids that are not being included. Who are the kids that all of a sudden had a lot of friends last week, but this week they have no friends? She's looking for patterns. Who's being bullied? Because she says all of that happens with out of her earshot and eye shot. She's looking for kids that maybe need a little help being encouraged to how to make friends or how to join in a group. She's trying to cut off the loneliness. She's trying to teach kids how not to be lonely, because that's a lot of these shooters are lonely kids that never learned how to overcome some of that social inadequacies, so to speak. Wow. And this is mind-blowing. I mean,
that is.
I was crying.
She has my vote for Teacher of the Year.
Yeah, I printed it at home. You can probably look it up, but it was just recently on the internet. And like I said, it was printed in Reader's Digest last year.
That she cares enough to at least make a determination or try and be helpful. Go for it, Kev.
I'll just be blatant.
Okay.
These kids are wasting their time. These teachers are wasting their time.
Okay.
Period. Because whenever we talk about gun control, it only affects the urban areas. Okay. These kids, let's face the facts. These kids that we're talking about, Columbine and all these different shooters, this is not happening at an urban school yet.
Yeah, that's true.
It's been isolated incidences. Now, if we really want to get technical, let's take an example from the urban areas that have gang infestation problems. They walk through metal detectors every day, and their fences are gated with iron fences, and there's cops that walk around constantly. So let's take this out of context for a second. The real gun control laws only affect those in the urban areas, because all of these kids are getting guns from licensed parents or negligent parents that aren't paying attention. There is no way on God's green earth that we are going to be at home putting together bombs and grabbing assault rifles and mom and dad didn't notice.
Right.
I mean, we had the 12-year-old had a shooting. She shot 2 people. Okay, we had this guy kill 17 people. And when you look at it, again, these are not urban areas. These are areas where everybody in society is, quote unquote, artificially safe. Security systems on the house. Police aren't in the area. Helicopters aren't in the sky 24/7. Whereas if we go to, let's say, South LA or Watts, the district of Watts, or Compton, or all the places where people are, quote unquote, scared to go, this is not a problem. Why? Why is it not a problem?
Yeah, why is it not a problem?
But yet, if we look at the crime rate there, they're all being locked up for having possession of firearms. So how are these kids that are 16, 17 years old grabbing firearms that are illegally gotten, and then all of a sudden there's no shootings? But then when we have kids that are supposed to be responsible young adults and coming up under middle class families, they're shooting 17 people. You're talking about the people that are lonely, the people that are bullied, the people, man, all of that. I understand that kids are going to be lonely. I understand that kids are going to be bullied, but it all comes down to this right here. If you're a parent, you're not paying attention to your kid is going to be a little off. It's just that simple. High school is a training ground for the world. Period. Yeah. You're not going to be liked by everybody. You might not be liked by everybody till you're 25 and filthy rich. You might not be liked by everybody till you're 45 and filthy rich. But if you can't deal with yourself enough to know that I need to find some outlet where I feel comfortable, then you're going to be a little off. And it's just that simple. You're not always supposed to fit in. The mathematicians didn't fit in with the chess club. The chess club didn't fit in with the football players. The football players didn't fit in with the track team, because they weren't all the same people. The band wasn't the same people. You have to be around those of like-mindedness. And when kids feel isolated, as we talked about with the kid that just killed 17 kids, here it is where he was already investigated by the FBI. He had already been promoted. He was going to shoot somebody. He had already been through all these different things. His mother had just died. He felt like he had nothing to lose. So when we look at the gun control laws, they always affect the urban areas, and the urban kids go to jail for 3 or 4 years while these kids get guns and shoot 17 people, and we, for some reason, talking about, they have a psychosis? I mean, this is another, affluenza incident as far as I'm concerned. It's always, kids shot up school, gun control. Then we have 20 more kids that are Hispanic or Asian or white or black that are in urban areas, they go to jail. And we sit here and talk about, we don't want any assault rifles. Well, how are these kids getting the assault rifles?
That's it, exactly. And you make some excellent points. Excellent points. And I really appreciate your perspective. One of the things, though, that I think we have to keep in mind, I don't think gun control would make a bit of difference. I don't think it'd make one iota difference. I really don't. Because, go ahead.
People that are angry and frustrated and are so full of despair, they feel that they have no alternative but to create violence, will create violence in other ways.
They'll use a different way,
I don't think the guns are the problem. I don't, they're a part of it, but they're not the big thing. The problem is the people that are so full of despair they feel they have no other solution.
Right, and we look at other countries where they do have gun control, and they still do have mass murders. They're just done with other means: knives, hatchets, axes.
Period.
Scotland,
Arson.
Yeah, there's still other means to do the dastardly deeds. But I personally don't think gun control is going to make one iota of difference, because people don't understand the energy behind all of it. And there's a really good scene from Andy Griffith that I thought was so poignant. And Andy Griffith was I know, Kevin, this is much before your time, but Mayberry RFD, he was a sheriff who never carried a gun. His deputy Barney Fife carried a gun. He never knew what to do with it, but he carried one, and he never did. And somebody asked him why he didn't carry a gun, and he said, well, a lot of people confuse fear with respect. And he said, so if I carried a gun and a person looked at me, they would most likely be looking at me with fear. I would much rather them look at me with respect. And I thought, that's it. It's all about energy. It really is all about energy. And I think that that's true. If you're carrying a weapon because you think people respect you, you're wrong. It's about fear. And energy attracts energy. So I think people need to start learning how energy works, and then they would understand that it's really not about gun control or anything else. It's about understanding energy.
I've never seen a gun pick itself up and kill people.
There you go.
It's just that simple. The gun doesn't fire itself. Somebody has to fire the gun.
Right.
And again, we could sit here and talk about, arson. We could sit here and talk about the stabbings. We could sit here and talk about people that have driven their cars down the street and killed people. It's not the gun, like you said, it's the person, but it still comes back to the fact that we are not dealing with a social problem. And the social problem is people are afraid to not fit in. That is our biggest problem right now. The people that don't fit in feel like, since I don't fit in, I'm going to kill the people that I feel do fit in.
Oh, I see.
And that's really what the problem is. We used to call certain people nerds or geeks.
Right.
Well, a lot of these people that we call nerds or geeks are running the world right now.
Yes, they are.
And now a lot of us that were quote unquote the cool kids are feeling a little bit bad because, hey, we're getting the minimum wage job, or we're fighting for the minimum wage job, and we're dealing with the nerds or geeks. A lot of these officers that we acknowledge to be these fearful people were the nerds and geeks in high school. They were the jocks that never made it, or they were the jocks that never played. They were the looked down upon, if you were, the bullied.
Yeah.
And they take that gun and they take that badge and they use it for a flip. Uh-huh. You have the Hollywood bank robbery. I'm sure you guys remember where they came out with assault rifles and they shot up everybody. Okay, well, right after that, we militarized our police. For what? I just don't understand why. You could take people that are in urban areas, and then you can look at suburban areas, and there is more mass shootings in the suburban areas than there are in the urban areas. You have the urban areas where, yes, there are a lot of shootings, but they're isolated incidents. Kid gets mad at kid shoot one kid dies. Okay, but it hasn't went to the extent where kids have been shooting 27 people or 37 people, or shooting up a school that they just feel that, oh, we didn't get along, so I shot 27 people. The gun is not the problem. Again, these are kids we're talking about in the quote-unquote ghetto. If anybody should feel alone, it should be the kid that his mother can't afford it. His dad can't afford it. He doesn't know his father. He doesn't know his mother. He grew up in foster care. He grew up in a school that didn't necessarily have enough books to teach him what it is. But it's the exact opposite. And I'm wondering, is it so much as the kid and his loneliness, or is it privilege? Because when you're poor and alone, you learn to survive. To whereas when you're rich and alone, you're taught that everybody should feel sorry for you because you don't have enough. Victim. Your parents aren't around. Exactly, and you're the victim of it. Yeah. And then now here it is where you're in mom's garage and your dad's garage, and again we'll go back to Columbine where you're building bombs. Let's just think of that for a second. The danger in just building a bomb. We're not even going to talk about the guns. We're going to talk about the danger in just building the bomb. These kids set out for months just learning how to make bombs and then carry the bomb. There's not too many special job for dealing with bombs. Right. Because most human beings are not going to sit there and make a bomb. So again, does it become, oh, woe is me? Or does it become, and you could talk about, they did it with the rap. They said rap was breeding the violence. Then they did it with the video games. They said video games breeding the violence. And now they're talking about the guns is breeding the violence. Right. But the fact is still remaining that even if you took the gun away, we've just shown you different examples where arson, knives, bats, hatchets, everything is a weapon. I mean, you go to prison, there are no guns in prison. There are no guns in prison, and yet prisoners are still stabbed. Guards are still cut. People are still shot by guards. So there's no weapons in prison except for the makeshift barbaric ingenuity that prisoners come up with, but there's still a form of violence that takes place. So when we flip it to the outside where guns are available, why would you not use a projectile instead of a handmade? It's because kids are too scared to face other people. And that's what it's boiling down to.
So, this is such a deep subject, but you've really shed some new light on things, and I would like to see you get some media attention on this, because I think it's a whole different light, and I think that you're right on target. It's so much more. It's so much more than the guns. It's so much more than any of it. And you're right. So what? We don't fit in. So what? We don't fit in. You know what? That's been the way since time immemorial. There have always been people who don't fit in. But like you said, Kevin, they're often the ones that really rise to the top.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what society wants. If you fit into society, you can't rule society. The minority always rules the majority. That's how it goes. In any government, the minority always rules the majority. And if you fit into the majority, you cannot be a leader. We've looked at different examples who have contributed to our civilization right now. You have, for example, Einstein. He was looked at to be crazy. Beethoven, Bach, all these people were looked at to be nuts.
That's true.
In their time of living. But now here it is where we idolize these individuals because of their ingenuity and their resources that they grabbed from areas that the status quo didn't fit into. And it's just different, and people are not willing to accept, hey, I'm different.
Maybe, okay, we're going to come back. We're going to pick up on this subject because that's the one we should be talking about. We'll be back with more of the Broad Perspective in just a minute. Stay tuned.
The 12th hour.
A show literally about everything.
Everything.
A candid discussion between friends about their different perspectives on what they think may be going on.
Or what is not going on.
With so many different areas of information being given out, we attempt to put together the puzzle pieces to create the broad perspective of the whole picture.
Welcome back to the Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
We're continuing our discussion on, I don't really want to call it gun control, but let's talk about mass shootings or whatever, these mass murders that are happening here with greater frequency, more and more. And it's usually with the shooter is generally someone who's disenfranchised. The Las Vegas shooter, we still don't know what's happened with him, but with the school children, we do have a little better insights. And they generally are kids that don't feel like they fit in. And Kevin had some good insights about that.
Well, we need to come up with some solutions. So the solutions, I think, is start to bring some of our old principles back. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be alone. It's okay to deal with yourself while you're alone. It's okay to have different interests. Again, I've always pointed out that just because a kid likes to dance doesn't necessarily make him, homosexual, as we often put in younger years, where we see kids, little boys that like to dance, or little girls that like to play basketball, or the guy sports, if you will, for a sexist matter, for whatever reason society gives it. It doesn't make you any more or less than the individual that you are. If that's who you are, that's who you are. Maybe you're the little girl that likes to play tackle football with the boys. That might be who you are. You're the little boy that likes to weave baskets and bake cookies. That doesn't make you any different. But I think that society is making it to where if you don't fit in, then you should feel so bad about yourself that you should either kill yourself or kill other people. And I think that one of the things that we fail to realize is two questions that psychologists are taught to look for, and two questions that psychiatrists are taught to look for are you feeling homicidal or are you feeling suicidal? These are two things that they ask their patients constantly, because that's when they're required to report these instances. But I think that it comes back to fundamentals of kindergarten teachers to teach these kids that because you like to bake cookies and you're a little boy, it's okay to be different. Bake cookies. You might be the next Chef Ramsay for all we know. Bake cookies. Do what you're good at. You might be the first girl to play tackle football. I highly doubt it, just because our NFL players are becoming a lot bigger and a lot more barbaric. But if that's your dream, I say chase it until the point that you can't chase it anymore, and then change where you're going to go. Maybe because right now, if you look at it, some of those little girls are actually crossing the barrier and they're becoming referees. And that's a big deal within football in itself. They're becoming referees and they're becoming coaches as well. And that's a big deal within that sport, because that's a highly male-dominated sport as far as referees, as far as coaching, as far as players. So again, I think that the solution is we need to bring back some of the ways of old. And when I say ways of old, you need to bring back spanking as well. I'm so serious about that, because
we'll tackle that on another show.
These kids. The reason why I say that is because when you were spanked because you did something wrong. In other words, you played with fire.
Not always.
Okay,
no. As someone who suffered from child abuse.
Yeah, I was about to say it's a difference between child abuse and spanking.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about.
And I'm not saying me.
Yeah, we're talking about spanking. See, because there's I beat you with a 2x4, and then there's I popped you on the leg. And the reason I say that is because, for example, when you had kids that played with fire, you were spanked immediately. Why? Because it posed an immediate danger. But when you had parents just come home and just decide, hey, it's Tuesday, I'm going to whoop all the kids in the house, that's a different form of spanking. That's beating.
We have some people that have no ability to self-control. For those people, you cannot tell them we should bring back spanking, because they have no ability to self-control. They will abuse it just like they will abuse anything else. They have no ability to monitor their own thoughts and feelings and reactions in a way that...
And limited self-control.
Yeah,
and
limited self-control.
I think that there is a problem with that. I get what you're saying, Kevin. I almost think that that's a cultural thing, though. Maybe I'm wrong.
Because I was just about to say that's negating the fact that humans in themselves are all different.
Those people
that you're talking about, 9 times out of 10 were either beat when they were younger, or, like you said, have a mental illness themselves. And that's where social services, and again, the teachers paying attention, because I know a lot of kids when I was younger, when child abuse laws were actually really, really heavily promoted in schools, that were getting beat, that were being abused, and their parents did get dealt with in different ways, because teachers did pay attention to the bruising and the things that were hidden. And that again comes back to the ways of old, where teachers weren't so compounded with kids that they weren't able to pay attention to their classroom, where they were able to get to know their students and their students' individual behaviors, and then thus deal with them as individuals and hopefully get them to progress in life. It's a teacher's job, but it's a parent's job, and it's a collective work again in society, to where we have to understand that at one point in time, especially in my father's generation and my grandmother's generation, students were beat by their teachers.
Oh, I know. We still had, I remember teachers back when I was in high school had paddles, and if you got a whack, you got to sign the paddle.
You see what I'm saying? So
it
does come back to, again, it's a very cautious area that we're speaking of, because when you have child abuse versus spanking, it's a difference.
Of course it is. But that's the danger.
But again, individual interpretation, even in families, what one considers child abuse would not be child abuse to another. We have people that just don't self-regulate very well. But again, it all comes back to self-soothing. A person that is so out of control that they would abuse another human being, whether it's a beating or a spanking or whatever, that's a person that could benefit from a heck of a lot of therapy with how to deal with their own emotions. But it's not going to happen in 12 visits sanctioned by the state.
Okay, but sometimes therapy doesn't work. Sometimes you can go to a therapist every day of the week, and I don't feel comfortable enough to even talk to you. And then not only that, you're forcing me to be here, so I'm really already at edge at the fact that I have to be here. Self-soothing is something you do to a baby that doesn't know any better. Once you become a conscious adult or a young adult, self-soothing is something that's out the window. If you don't know how to deal with yourself, there's nobody on the face of this planet that's going to stick you in a room until you figure it out. That's what prison is for. That's what they do to prisoners. They stick you in a room until you rehabilitate. That's the biggest load of malarkey that I've ever heard, because of the fact that if we had that much of an ability to self-soothe, as you put it, to be put in a room or put in a position where we could just talk to people, or we could just figure it out by ourselves, then we wouldn't have such a high recidivism rate.
recidivism.
It's not something that to the conscious nature is able to be practiced, because once you're conscious, again, it comes to the point of what are you dealing with as a human being? Are you able to deal with I'm different? All of these people that are doing this stuff are different.
And right, and I think you're absolutely right. What we have done with our media is we want everybody to conform. We want everybody to be beautiful. We want the beautiful model. We want the star athlete. We want to be just like them. And if we're not striving to that, then we're not enough. And it boils down to that whole not enough thing, which is a soapbox I regularly stand on. And that's what we reinforce with people. And perhaps we need to go back and reinforce the story of the ugly duckling, who thought he was so ugly and it turned out to be a beautiful swan. That it was okay for the ugly duckling to be who the ugly duckling was, and for the go back to some of those stories that it was okay to be different. And we're so hell-bent on trying to get every single person to conform, to look like America's top model, and to look like the Heisman Trophy winner, and to be president of the United States, that we make no room for being real. See, this is the whole thing. I think that it boils down to our inability to be cool with being real.
With being who you are.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm saying. I stress that. Be who you are. I've always been one to love the fact that women are able to do what men can do. I've always been one to do that, because I am an athlete myself, and I love seeing a woman on the field, because I'm going to treat her just like the boy that she is. And I've explained to you guys on different stories where I've actually coached girls teams, and one of my first things that I tell them is I don't believe in girls sports, I only believe in athletes. And that's because I want girls to understand that they possess the same athletic ability that any male does, and the only reason why the sport is separate is because of the natural strength that differs between the sexes. But that does not have anything to do with your conscious ability to think and to know the sport as well as any male. And I think that once we understand the difference, like you said, we can kind of grasp it's okay.
That's right. And not every girl is going to be an athlete.
No.
Nor does she want to.
No. Nor is every man.
Nor is every man. Exactly. Exactly.
And again, we could point out, like you said, America's Next Top Model, the person that actually chose all of these models to walk in a pair of high heels down the runway is a man.
Yep.
It is a man.
I remember I just read an article about someone, I can't remember who it was sitting at a table at some very prestigious dinner with a whole bunch of models, and they were some of the top models in the world, and it was a guy, and he was listening to the conversation, and every single one of them was talking about what was wrong with them. Oh, something's wrong with my nose, or my cheeks, or whatever. They were picking apart their own flaws, and here we are thinking they're some of the most beautiful women in the world, but they were self-criticizing who they were. And to me, that's amazing, because I know plenty of people who probably wouldn't be considered beautiful, but are so cool of being able to walk into a room with just who they are and be just who they are. That is power, and that's what I would like to see us working towards with all people. That's where the connectiveness would be, is just being real and understanding.
And the truth is that all societies function on jobs being done that nobody wants to do.
Right.
We need people to do some of these dirty jobs. They are just as valued members of society as anybody else. Look at the popularity of the show. What is it? Dirty Jobs or something. We need people to pick up the trash. We need people to clean restrooms. We need undertakers, even though people think that's creepy. And, there's a lot of dirty jobs that we don't even know that have to
recognize every single one of them. Because I think I shared this story with Kevin the other day. For our listener, Sean Connery, who's one of the early James Bond 007s, very famous actor. He's up in years now, but very, very handsome, very, very macho. But I remember he was an interview on Johnny Carson when he was talking about before he got into acting, he supported himself building coffins, wooden coffins. And Johnny Carson said something to the effect of, "Oh, wow, who'd have thunk?" And he said, "You know what? There is honor in every job, no matter what it is."
I think that's what we need to kind of teach kids.
Yeah.
Is because again, some of our kids are just different. They just see the world in such a different light than we do.
Right.
Like you pointed out, some of the, not even the dirty jobs. We have some of our kids that have green thumbs.
Yes.
And if we were just able to promote botanism for just a simple, explanation of that, I mean, could we think of all of the plants that may have a contribution to our society that we haven't even touched? I mean, we see new species of animals and new species of plants all the time. But because it's, like you said, it's so looked down upon to be the farmer, or to be the botanist, or to be the person in the rainforest walking around looking at leaves, it's people are not identifying with the fact that they like this stuff. If you want to be the person that deep sea dives and goes to look at, this exotic fish, I welcome you to it. I'm not going to be the person in there with the great white shark trying to figure out its mannerisms. But if you want to be a marine biologist and tell me what it does, I'm more than welcome to watch you on Discovery Channel. And
I want to wander through the forest looking at leaves. I'll volunteer to be that person.
you see what I'm saying? And it comes down to, again, where our kids they're not afforded this right. You have so many shows where we have people going out there and living with lions, and the guy that went out there and lived with the bear, and the guy swimming with the stingrays, all of which are dead. But they die doing what they love to do. And again, I'm not going to be out there with the bear. I'm not going to be out there with the shark or the stingray or the lion or anything like that. But I will enjoy watching you, and I will learn a lot from you. Again, it's because they're different. That's what they find their calling to. We have the protections with animals as far as rhinos right now and elephants going on with the ivory. We have people that are protecting them now, and it's bringing jobs to those countries where, they're being poached. And for people to go over there, humanitarians, and go over there and protect these animals and do what they feel they like doing, again, I welcome you to it. But our kids have to understand that you might not always be socially accepted because you have a different form of knowledge, which is not status quo.
Exactly. We could go on and on about that, and I think that is what is so important, and we've neglected that because of media indoctrination. You've got to go through school, graduate from high school, go to college, graduate from college, go and pursue a 9-to-5 job or 9-to-9 job or 9-to-midnight job because that's what's expected, and bring in that paycheck because that's when you're okay. It's not okay to quit high school. It's not okay to not go to college. It's not okay to work a part-time job and be with your family part-time, or work a part-time job as long as you're paying your bills. And be different from what society expects you to be. And that's where we have to shift things and really understand that. I think that's what we're missing, Kevin. I think you touched on it. You hit it. No, you didn't just touch on it. You hit the nail on the head. It's okay to be different. In fact, it's preferable to be different, but most importantly, be real. Just be true to who you are. Go ahead, Laura. I know you want to jump in there.
Every human being has their own particular niche. You need to find out where your niche is and be good at it and celebrate it. And let's bring back a club in high school for kids called the Outsiders Club.
Oh, yeah.
Where they can celebrate their own individual uniqueness that isn't represented in other clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something definitely to think about. Wow, interesting stuff. We're going to wrap it all up here in this last segment because somehow we'll figure out a way to do that. But we've touched on a lot of subjects that are all interconnected in some way or another. Stay tuned. We will be right back in a moment with more of The Broad Perspective. Be right back.
BPN. Join the awakening.
The Broad Perspective Network is a portal designed to reveal a new perspective and reality to those who wish to know the truth about the world we live in and our role in it.
BPN. See beyond the illusion.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And this is our concluding segment of today's show. It's certainly been interesting and fun, and we have so much more we could talk about. But one of the things that Kevin mentioned during the break, and I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about it, Kevin.
What I want people to do is get out there and get their kids and celebrate their kids' differences and encourage their kids to be different and understand that when their kids are different, they can be celebrated for their differences and looking at the world a lot differently than most. And I say that because a lot of our individuals that we celebrate today with the changing of the world are all different. They were all a part of a different class. They were all part of what we consider to be crazy, or to consider to be the nerds, or consider to be the outsiders, as you once put it. And I think that when you do that and you allow your kid to spread their wings and fly in a different pattern, then they don't fall in with the flock. And that is the most important. I believe the movie The Accountant actually gives a good example where the father, explained to his children. He said there are sheep, there's a shepherd, and then there's sheepdog. And he explained the shepherd, in his case was God. Mm-hmm. And then he explained the sheep were those that were herded and were all conformed to be the same, like we try to do with majority of society. And the sheepdog's job was to protect not only himself but the sheep. And I think that when you look at that, you might be the sheepdog. You might be the one that stands out from the crowd. You might be the black sheep. You might be the one that just doesn't fit in, and that's okay, because you might be the reason that everybody else is safe, or you might be the reason that everybody else is changing. And we have to look at those that came before us as an example, because they say that history repeats itself. Well, all of our history is not bad, and some things do need to happen again. We do need to look at racism again. Mm-hmm. We do need to look at sexism again. These are all things that are repeating themselves, that were negative, that were once fought against, women's rights, civil rights, and maybe it's time for a reoccurrence. But what little girl or what little boy is going to be so different that they actually speak out because they don't care what anybody else thinks, right, to the point to where they're willing to go against the status quo?
And that's the most courageous thing of all, when you have someone who is willing to challenge the status quo in front of everyone, in front of their classmates or in front of their community or whatever it is, to say something. And I don't mean something horrible or anything like that. I mean just something that challenges the common perception of the way things are. Anyone who has that kind of courage really is a leader. And they may be ridiculed for the moment, but think about all the people in the past who had thoughts that were so progressive. I don't mean progressive, futuristic, and yet they were laughed at. They were laughed at and made fun of. And that's what with all of our inventors in times past.
It's really easy to rail against your enemies, quote unquote,
sure,
and have people call you a hero. It's another thing to stand up and be who you are in front of the people that you consider your friends or your countrymen, right, and do good. And and they call you an enemy. It's harder to stand up against the people you care about.
Yes.
That takes a great deal of a different type of courage.
Right. And no matter what they say, and they might shake their heads and go, oh man, this person's crazy, but and on occasion perhaps that's true. But to a greater degree, they're just thinking outside the box, and the rest of the world isn't seeing that yet.
Exactly, and they're like you said, they're futuristic.
Right.
Their mindsets are different, because I'm pretty sure that Tesla was crazy.
Yep.
Oh, I'm almost certain that man was crazy, because right now, look at his inventions. Look at what's going on right now today, just with energy. Yeah. Nobody would have thought that you could have an electric car driving down the street when you could barely get a car that you had to propel by itself. So again, I want parents to just celebrate the differences. I want teachers to celebrate the differences. We should just have a different day. I mean, we have all these other days. Like, what's one more?
Right.
Different day. Go out with your hair green. Go out with the nose rings. Go out with the plugs and the crazy hair. Celebrate the tie dye or whatever you want to do. Because one thing we could say that the 70s has was the sex, the love, and all this other stuff. But one thing about it, everybody was happy.
Right.
And they all were joined under one cause, that when they did speak out against something, they spoke out as a collective that was different. And, many derogatory terms that we now celebrate, hippie for being one of them, which as back then, if you were called a hippie, you were very offended, which is now, you're called a hippie. You're like, all right, man.
Cool.
All right, bro. Cool.
Far out.
Yeah. See? So it's just to the point where I think people need to, again, just grab some of history, bring it in the present day, and understand that those differences is what makes up American society and keeps things going in the right direction. I think that we pride ourselves on being different than the rest of the world.
Right.
So why not just celebrate it? We're all different. Let's be different. And if you want to go out and speak what's the language in Star Trek? I can't think of the language in Star Trek.
What is that? What's that?
Klingon or something
Klingon?
like
Yeah,
that. Well, you have people that actually spend their time trying to learn this language.
And
so
that's
if you want to go out and speak Klingon, okay, well, hey, we might need another language to add to it and put it in the dictionary, and that's where we'll go from there.
If you want to wear polyester paisley pants,
hey, dress like Prince, go for it.
Yeah,
if you want to dress like Prince or dress like Michael Jackson or be Michael Jackson or be Prince, I say go for it. Do whatever you're going to do.
I'm not wearing my pants with the butt cheeks cut out.
Oh, the chaps? Well, and that's what I think that we really need to focus on, because once we identify with those differences and once we get in tune with those differences, we'll realize that in our midst is the next change.
You're right. And I think having said all of this, this next sentence is probably the most important of all, is not just us being cool being different, is being cool with everybody else being different. See, this is where the problem comes in. It's okay if we want to be different and we're cool with having green hair and wearing paisley pants or what have you, but we might make fun of you or you or you if you're different. And that's where we have to take a good hard look at ourselves and say, if it's okay for me to be different, guess what? It's okay for you to be different.
Well,
it really is.
I'll say this. We go back to the old saying of this. If nobody's talking about you, you're not doing something right. And it's just that simple. If you're not talked about, you're not doing something right. So if you're different and people are talking about you, you're probably doing something right. I mean, no fad gets introduced without somebody starting it first. And I'm totally against skinny jeans, but they are in right now. I can't do it, but there are millions out there right now wearing pants so tight them and their girlfriends are arguing about whose jeans those are. But hey, if that's what they do and that's the fad, somebody had to do it and they're respecting it. So if guys want to wear leggings and dress like their girlfriends, go for it. I say more power to you. You're one step away from something else, but it's okay. You have to, with freedom of speech, you have to be willing to not only say what you're going to say and people for to accept it, but you got to be willing to hear what you might not like and accept it as well. And I think that's what we're getting away from with individuality.
Yes.
People are not willing to hear or see what they don't feel should be in that box. And I think we need to break the barriers of the box and maybe become a circle, a square, triangle, with whatever else that object you want to be, and just go for it.
And that's it. That's really the whole thing.
You know what?
That's
Take the time and get to know a quiet kid, because I guarantee you every quiet kid has some fascinating abilities and talents that he doesn't know how to share with anybody.
Right.
Well, to the students, I say get to know a quiet kid, because he's probably really good at the subject he's being quiet in.
How many billionaires today were quiet kids?
Yeah,
I bet you far more than you think.
Exactly.
And that's my whole point. The people that end up running the world are the ones that stood out.
And every one of these shooters, let's bring it back to that. If every one of these shooters would have maybe been able to not done this and gone on with their lives, some, not all of them killed themselves in the process. There are still some that are alive, but every one of them, had they not done this act and managed to grow up and mature, it might be amazing who they turned out to be.
Or had they not been taught that they need attention.
Yeah.
Had they not been taught you need attention,
right?
Would they have been able to just
okay.
say, would they have been able to say, you know what, it's going to be all right and I'll be able to make it? Because, I've dealt with the death of a father, and I've dealt with, a lot of different deaths, and it's not always easy to see the brighter side of death. And sometimes you do fall into a really dark place, which I'm sure he was in at the time, especially with losing your mother at a young age. And it comes down to, are you going to be okay? Right. See, that's the thing that I think we need to stress with the kids, that it's okay. And once they learn those few words, it's okay, there's nothing that really affects you, because you're celebrating what's okay.
Even more than that, you're okay. You're okay. It's okay, and you're okay. Who you are right now is okay.
Exactly.
Even if you have some bad things going on in your life, it's okay to be sad. But guess what? Even amongst that being sad, if you can even form some kind of social connections, you can still have a laugh now and then in the midst of all the sadness. It is healthy and appropriate.
Right. Yeah, and they even make music about it. I mean, you have... they call them emos. I don't know what it's a short abbreviation for emotionals. And it's music about that, about being emotional and crying and being a little down and out and not fitting in and not being a part of, a wide base of acceptance. And I think that once we pay attention to, you can still be successful in your sadness and make money and do what's great to the rest of the world, you fall into any collective group. If that's what you want to be a part of, as a collective group, there's people out there that are loss of mothers, loss of fathers, loss of loved ones, loss of anything, and you could find a group in anything.
And who has not been there? Who's not been there? We've
True.
all been there. So listeners, all we can say is be real. That's the bottom line here. Be real and be considerate of others. So don't take your peacock on an airplane.
Also, don't forget to press subscribe to our YouTube link and leave comments if possible. Leave comments and press subscribe. It's the big red button that says subscribe.
There you go. Yes. And thanks for listening today. Join us same time, same place next week where it's all perspective. Join us and broaden yours. Thanks for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed today's show. To keep programs like this and other programs on the Broad Perspective Network, go to thebroadperspective.com and click the donate button. We truly appreciate your support.